The ballroom is drenched in golden light, the kind that makes diamonds look like stars. Ji-ho stands near the grand staircase, his royal blue suit catching every glance in the room. His fingers brush against the velvet box in his pocket. Tonight, he will ask Ayomide to marry him. Tonight, he will finally choose love over legacy. Then the music stops. A champagne flute slips from Ayomide's hand, shattering across the marble floor like a gunshot. Her mahogany skin, radiant just moments before, turns ashen. She gasps, clutching her throat, her emerald gown pooling around her as she collapses into Ji-ho's arms. The room erupts in chaos, screams, phones flashing, security rushing forward, but all Ji-ho can hear is the desperate hammering of his own heart. Ayomide, stay with me. His voice cracks, the wolf finally howling. Before the ambulance even arrives, the doors burst open. Not paramedics, NIS agents. A woman in a black suit strides through the panicked crowd, her badge gleaming under the chandeliers. Her eyes lock onto Ji-ho, kneeling on the floor, cradling the unconscious woman he loves. Kang Ji-ho, she says, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. You're under arrest. But her gaze flickers to Ayomide, and something shifts in her expression. Confusion, recognition, horror. She whispers into her radio, run the DNA. Now. We are thrust into two worlds colliding. Ji-ho's world is one of shadows and silk, a kingdom built on blood money, smuggling routes, and his father's iron rule over the Kangdae syndicate. He is the heir no one dares cross, the man who signs contracts with a fountain pen in one hand and a loaded gun in the other. But in the quiet hours before dawn, he is something else entirely. A man who traces the curve of Ayomide's spine and listens to her talk about saving lives instead of taking them. Ayomide's world is sterile white coats and research labs, saving premature infants in Seoul's most prestigious hospital. She is the daughter of Nigerian immigrants who clawed their way to respectability, a doctor who believes science can heal anything, even the broken boy she fell in love with. She doesn't know that the man who whispers poetry into her hair is the same man the police have been hunting for 3 years. Their love is the secret that keeps Ji-ho human. But his father, Chairman Kang, has been watching. Waiting. And tonight, at that glittering gala, he made his move, not with bullets, but with something far more insidious. Something that will unravel a lie buried decades deep in a Nigerian village, where the Kangdae syndicate sins are written in blood that Ji-ho and Ayomide share. The warehouse in Brooklyn smelled like old blood and diesel fuel. Ji-ho stood in the center of the concrete floor, his royal blue suit pristine despite the chaos around him. 3 men knelt before him, zip-tied and trembling. They'd stolen from the wrong shipment, cocaine worth $2 million, now scattered across the East River like snow. Please, one of them begged, his voice cracking. We didn't know it was yours. Ji-ho raised his hand. Silence fell like a guillotine blade. He didn't need to shout. Power whispered. My father would have killed you already, Ji-ho said, his Korean accent sharp as broken glass. But I'm not my father. He nodded to his lieutenant, Soulmate, who handed him a tablet. You'll work off the debt. 5 years. Every cent, with interest. Miss one payment, and I'll let Chairman Kang handle the rest. The men sobbed with relief as they were dragged away. Soulmate lit a cigarette, shaking his head. You're too soft, boss. Your father's right about that. Ji-ho's jaw tightened. The black rose tattoo on his neck seemed to pulse in the fluorescent light. My father built an empire on corpses. I'm building something different. Yeah. Soulmate exhaled smoke. What's that? Ji-ho didn't answer. He was already walking toward his car, toward the only place in this godless city where he could breathe. Ayomide's apartment in Harlem glowed warm against the November cold. Ji-ho used his key, the one she'd given him 6 months ago, the night she'd said I don't care who you are in the daylight. I only care who you are with me. She stood at the stove, stirring jollof rice, her natural hair piled high in a silk scarf. When she turned and saw him, her smile was sunlight breaking through storm clouds. You're late, she said, but there was no anger in it. Business. He shrugged off his jacket, revealing the shoulder holster he always wore. She didn't flinch anymore. The kind that ends with blood on your shoes. The kind that ends with everyone still breathing. He crossed the small kitchen and wrapped his arms around her waist, breathing in her scent, shea butter and lavender. That's progress, isn't it? She turned in his arms, her deep brown eyes searching his face. Ji-ho, when are you going to walk away from all of this? Soon. The lie tasted bitter. I promise. They ate dinner on her worn couch, her medical textbooks stacked on the coffee table like a fortress against his world. She told him about the premature twins she'd saved that morning at Mount Sinai, how their heartbeats had synced after she'd held them together. He told her nothing about the warehouse, about the fear in those men's eyes, about how his father had called him weak 3 times this week. Later, in the sanctuary of her bedroom, Ji-ho traced the curve of her spine and whispered the only truth that mattered, "You make me want to be better." Then be better, she murmured, already half asleep. Start tomorrow. He held her until dawn, knowing that tomorrow was a luxury men like him couldn't afford. Ayomide first noticed it during her morning rounds. A slight tremor in her hands as she adjusted an infant's feeding tube. She blamed exhaustion, 70-hour work weeks would break anyone. But then came the headaches, sharp and sudden, like ice picks behind her eyes. By Wednesday, she was vomiting between patient consultations. "Girl, you need to go home," her colleague Dr. Rashida said, finding her in the staff bathroom. "You look like death." "I'm fine." Ayomide rinsed her mouth, studied her reflection. Her skin looked dull, ashen. Dark circles carved shadows beneath her eyes. Probably just the flu. But Ayomide was a neonatologist, trained to spot patterns invisible to others. And this didn't feel like the flu. This felt wrong. That night, instead of going home, she detoured to the hospital lab. Her ID badge granted access to the empty wing. She'd done this before, sneaking in to run her own blood work when curiosity about her iron levels had struck. Nothing unusual about a doctor checking her own health. Except everything about this felt unusual. She drew her own blood with practiced precision, labeled the vial with a false patient number, and fed it into the automated analyzer. While the machine hummed and clicked, she sat in the dark, listening to the hospital's nighttime symphony, ventilators breathing for the dying, monitors beeping out borrowed time. The results printed 20 minutes later. Ayomide's hands shook as she read them. White blood cell count, elevated. Liver enzymes, abnormal. But it was the last line that made her blood turn to ice. Unidentified foreign compound detected. Molecular structure unknown. Recommend immediate toxicology screening. Someone was poisoning her. She sat in the darkness, her brilliant mind racing through possibilities. Not food, she and Ji-ho had eaten the same meals for days. Not environmental, her apartment was clean. Which meant someone had targeted her specifically, deliberately. Her phone buzzed. Ji-ho, missing you. Come over? She stared at the message, her finger hovering over the reply. Should she tell him? Should she trust the man whose world was built on violence with the knowledge that someone wanted her dead? Instead, she typed, working late. Tomorrow? Then she printed the results, folded them into her purse, and walked out of the hospital into the November night, knowing that tomorrow might be too late. The Metropolitan Club ballroom glittered like a jewelry box. New York's elite circulated beneath crystal chandeliers, politicians, old money, and the carefully laundered criminals who'd bought their way into respectability. Chairman Kang stood near the bar, holding court with a senator whose re-election campaign the Kang Day syndicate had quietly funded. Ji-ho watched his father from across the room, his jaw tight. The old man wore his power-like cologne, subtle but suffocating. At 72, Chairman Kang was still a force of nature, his silver hair slicked back, his black suit tailored to perfection. He caught Ji-ho's eye and raised his champagne glass in a mocking toast. Play your part, that gesture said. Remember who you are. But tonight, Ji-ho had other plans. The velvet box burned in his pocket like a secret. Inside, his grandmother's ring, a 2-carat diamond set in platinum, smuggled out of Seoul during the Korean War. It was the only piece of his family's history not stained with blood. Ayomide arrived at 9, and the room seemed to inhale. Her emerald gown hugged every curve, the silk catching the light as she moved. Her hair was styled in those old Hollywood waves she loved, her lips painted deep red. She was a queen walking among peasants. Ji-ho met her at the entrance, his breath catching. You're staring, she whispered, taking his arm. The whole room is staring. He guided her toward the dance floor, away from his father's calculating gaze. You're the most beautiful woman here. Flatterer, But she was smiling, radiant, alive. They danced to something slow and jazz-soaked. Jiho held her close, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat against his chest. This was it. The moment he'd been planning for weeks. He'd speak to her father tomorrow, do it properly, but tonight he'd ask the question that would change everything. Ayomide, he began, his voice low. There's something I need to. She stumbled. Just slightly, a hesitation in her step. He caught her, frowning. Are you all right? Fine. She pressed a hand to her temple. Just dizzy. When did you last eat? I had lunch, I think. Jiho, I'm fine, really. But she wasn't fine. He could see it now, the sheen of sweat on her forehead, the way her pupils had dilated. We're leaving. No, please. I just need water. The champagne flute slipped from her hand. Everything after that happened in slow motion. The glass shattering. Ayomide's knees buckling. Jiho catching her as she collapsed, her emerald gown spreading around them like spilled paint. The room erupting in gasps and screams. Someone shouting for a doctor, the irony not lost on him. She was the doctor, and she was dying in his arms. Ayomide. His voice cracked, all composure shattered. Baby, stay with me. Look at me. Her eyes rolled back. Foam appeared at the corner of her mouth. Then the doors exploded inward. Not paramedics. Federal agents. NIS badges gleaming. Leading them was a woman Jiho recognized from surveillance photos, Agent Rebecca Cho, the one who'd been hunting his family for 5 years. She strode through the panicked crowd, her weapon holstered but her hand near it. Her eyes locked onto Jiho, kneeling on the floor, cradling Ayomide. Kang Jiho, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. Step away from the woman. She needs help. He looked up, desperation naked on his face. Call an ambulance. Already on the way. But Agent Cho's gaze had shifted to Ayomide, and something strange flickered across her features. Recognition? Horror? She pulled out her radio, her voice dropping to a whisper. Run the DNA. Now. I need a match within the hour. Jiho didn't understand. Didn't care. All that mattered was the woman dying in his arms and the helplessness crushing his chest. Across the ballroom, hidden in shadow, Chairman Kang watched his son weep. And smiled. Mount Sinai's emergency room became a war zone. Ayomide was rushed into Trauma Bay 3, a team of doctors swarming her unconscious body. Jiho tried to follow, but security held him back, standard protocol for potential crime scenes. Agent Cho stood beside him in the waiting room, her expression unreadable. Tell me what she ingested. I don't know. Jiho's hands were shaking, still stained with her lipstick from where he'd held her face. We were dancing. She said she felt dizzy, and then, his voice broke. Any enemies? Anyone who'd want to hurt her? He laughed, bitter and sharp. You asking me if my girlfriend has enemies? Look at who I am. Look at my family. Everyone I touch turns to ash. Agent Cho studied him with clinical detachment. So you're saying this could be connected to your organization? I'm saying I don't know. He slammed his fist against the wall. Just save her. Please. Hours crawled by. Jiho paced the waiting room like a caged wolf, his royal blue suit rumpled, his carefully slicked hair falling across his eyes. Sungminit arrived with coffee and updates from the family lawyers, but Jiho waved him away. None of it mattered. Nothing mattered except the woman fighting for her life behind those double doors. At 2 a.m., a doctor emerged. Not one of Ayomide's colleagues, but an older woman with grey streaks in her hair and exhaustion carved into her face. She's stable, the doctor said. We've pumped her stomach and started chelation therapy. Whatever toxin was in her system, it's responding to treatment. Jiho's knees nearly buckled with relief. Can I see her? Soon. But there's something else. The doctor glanced at Agent Cho, then back to Jiho. When we ran her blood work, the system flagged something unusual. Her DNA triggered an alert in a federal database. Agent Cho stepped forward, her hand moving to her weapon. What kind of alert? Protected lineage protocol. The doctor pulled out a tablet, showing them a screen full of code Jiho didn't understand. It's a program that tracks descendants of individuals granted asylum or witness protection. Ayomide's genetic markers match a file from 1987. A Nigerian family that was relocated to the US under emergency circumstances. Jiho's blood turned to ice. What circumstances? The doctor looked uncomfortable. I don't have clearance for those details. But the file is flagged as connected to international organized crime. Specifically. She hesitated. The Kangdae syndicate. The waiting room tilted. Jiho grabbed the chair beside him to steady himself. That's impossible. The DNA doesn't lie. Agent Cho was already on her phone, barking orders. I need the full file. Everything. Cross-reference it with current family trees, going back 40 years. What are you saying? Jiho's voice was barely a whisper. What does my father have to do with Ayomide's family? Agent Cho met his eyes, and for the first time, he saw something like pity there. That's what we're about to find out. And Mr. Kang? Whatever we find, it's going to change everything. In the ICU, Ayomide lay unconscious, machines breathing for her, unaware that the poison in her veins was nothing compared to the truth about to surface. They let him see her at dawn. Ayomide lay in the ICU bed, her mahogany skin ashen against the white sheets, tubes running from her arms like umbilical cords to machines that beeped out her fragile existence. Jiho pulled a chair to her bedside and took her hand, careful not to disturb the fall. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. He didn't know what he was apologizing for yet. But he could feel it coming, the tsunami of consequences for being his father's son. Agent Cho entered without knocking. Behind her, 2 federal marshals and a man in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase. The lawyer, Jiho assumed. His lawyer, probably, sent by his father. Kang Jiho, Agent Cho said, her voice formal now, stripped of the almost sympathy from earlier. Stand up, please. He didn't move. I'm not leaving her. You don't have a choice. She nodded to the marshals, who moved forward with practiced efficiency. You're under arrest for racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, and violation of the RICO Act. You have the right to remain silent. This is insane. Jiho stood, positioning himself between the agents and Ayomide's bed. I haven't done anything. We have a witness willing to testify about the Brooklyn warehouse incident. And that's just the beginning. Agent Cho pulled out handcuffs. Your family's run is over, Mr. Kang. Starting with you. The marshals grabbed his arms. Jiho could have fought, he'd been trained since childhood to kill with his bare hands, but Ayomide was 3 feet away, hooked to machines that could fail if the room erupted into violence. So he let them cuff him, the metal biting into his wrists. She needs protection, he said as they led him toward the door. If this is connected to my father, he'll come for her. He'll finish what he started. We're aware. Agent Cho's expression was granite. She'll have a guard posted. That's not enough. Jiho's voice rose, desperate. You don't know him. You don't know what he's capable of. I know exactly what he's capable of. Agent Cho stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper only he could hear. I know about Nigeria. I know about the village. And I know that Ayomide's grandmother was one of 3 survivors. The floor dropped out from under him. What? We'll talk at the station. She nodded to the marshals. Get him out of here. They dragged him toward the hallway. Jiho twisted in their grip, looking back at Ayomide's unconscious form one last time. The morning light slanted through the window, catching on the machines keeping her alive, making everything look too bright, too sharp, too real. And then he saw it. His reflection in the window. The man in the royal blue suit, handcuffed, being led away from the only person he'd ever loved. The black rose tattoo on his neck seemed to throb. The wolf-like profile his father had always praised looked suddenly predatory, monstrous. Something inside him cracked. The sound that came out of him wasn't human, it was a howl of anguish that echoed through the ICU corridor. His knees buckled. The marshals held him up as he wept, all the years of carefully constructed control shattering like the champagne glass Ayomide had dropped. I love her, he sobbed, not caring who heard. Please. Don't let her die. Please. Agent Cho watched him break, her expression unreadable. Then she turned and walked away, leaving Jiho to be pulled into the elevator, into the machinery of justice he'd spent his whole life avoiding. In the ICU, Ayomide's heart monitor beeped steadily on. Somewhere in the dark of her unconscious mind, she was dreaming of her grandmother's voice, singing a lullaby in Yoruba about a girl who fell in love with a wolf. And in a penthouse suite across Manhattan, Chairman Kang poured himself scotch and made a phone call. "It's time," he said in Korean. "Erase everything." The interrogation room smelled like stale coffee and fear. Ji-ho sat across from Detective James Morrison, a black man in his 50s with gray at his temples and the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much. Between them, a manila folder, worn at the edges. "Your lawyer's on the way," Morrison said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "But I wanted to talk to you first." "Off the record." Ji-ho stared at his cuffed hands. "I have nothing to say." "Then just listen." Morrison opened the folder. Inside, photographs. Old ones, the colors faded, the edges yellowed. He slid the first one across the table. Ji-ho's breath caught. The photo showed a village, thatched roofs, red clay earth, children playing in the dirt. Except the children weren't playing. They were running. And in the background, smoke rose from burning buildings. "Nigeria, 1987, Morrison said quietly. "A small village outside Lagos. Population, roughly 300. Know what it's called now?" Ji-ho couldn't speak. "Nothing. Because it doesn't exist anymore." Morrison slid over another photo. This one showed bodies. Not clearly, the image was grainy, taken from a distance, but enough to make Ji-ho's stomach turn. "Your father was 37 years old. The Kangdae syndicate was expanding into international arms dealing. They needed a base in West Africa." Another photo. This one made Ji-ho's heart stop. His father stood in the center of the village, younger but unmistakable. Beside him, armed men. At his feet, kneeling villagers with their hands bound. "The village elders refused to sell their land," Morrison continued. "Refused to be displaced. So your father made an example." He paused, letting the weight of it settle. 273 people died that night. Men, women, children. Burned alive or shot trying to escape. "No." Ji-ho's voice was hoarse. "My father, he wouldn't." But even as he said it, he knew he was lying. His father had always been ruthless. Ji-ho had just never let himself imagine the full scope of that ruthlessness. Morrison slid over one final photograph. This one showed survivors, 27 people, mostly women and children, sitting in a refugee camp. And there, in the front row, a young woman held a baby. Her eyes stared into the camera with the hollow gaze of someone who'd lost everything. "That's Ayomide's grandmother," Morrison said softly. "Adunni Okafor. She was 19. The baby she's holding is Ayomide's mother, born 2 months after the massacre. The US granted them emergency asylum. New identities. A chance to disappear." Ji-ho couldn't breathe. Ayomide doesn't know. Her grandmother never told her. Wanted to protect her from the nightmares. Morrison leaned forward. "But here's the thing, Ji-ho. Adunni died 6 months ago. And right before she died, she did something interesting. She contacted the FBI. Said she had information about the Kangdae syndicate. Said she was ready to testify." The room spun. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your father found out. I'm saying he's known for months that there's a witness, a survivor, who could destroy him. And I'm saying the poison in Ayomide's system? It's the same chemical compound the syndicate used in Lagos in 1987. Ji-ho's world collapsed. Everything made sense now. His father's questions about Ayomide. The surveillance Ji-ho had noticed but dismissed. The way Chairman Kang had smiled at the gala, even as Ayomide collapsed. He knew, Ji-ho whispered. He knew who she was. He knew I loved her. And he poisoned her anyway. Not anyway, Morrison corrected gently. Because of it. His tying up loose ends. Ayomide is the last link to Nigeria. And you. He gestured to the photos. You're his greatest liability. A son who might actually have a conscience. Ji-ho looked at the photographs again. At the village that no longer existed. At Ayomide's grandmother, holding her baby, staring into a camera with eyes that had seen hell. I'll testify, he said, his voice steady for the first time in hours. Against my father. Against the syndicate. All of it. But you have to protect her. You have to keep Ayomide safe. Morrison studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. We'll do everything we can. But Jiho? Your father's not going to let this go. When he finds out you're cooperating, he's going to come for both of you. Let him come. Jiho met the detective's eyes, and Morrison saw something shift there, the wolf becoming something else. Something dangerous. He took her grandmother. He tried to take her. But he's not taking anything else. Not anymore. In a penthouse across the city, Chairman Kang received the news of his son's arrest. He smiled, poured another scotch, and dialed a number he'd been saving for a special occasion. Send the cleaners to Mount Sinai, he said in Korean. No survivors. The call came through at 4 p.m. Agent Cho was reviewing witness statements when her phone lit up with an encrypted alert from the NSA's Signal Intelligence Division. She answered on the first ring. We've got chatter, the analyst said, his voice tight. Korean organized crime channels. Multiple references to a hospital hit scheduled for tonight. Cho's blood ran cold. Mount Sinai. Confirmed. Target is the ICU, 4th floor. They're calling it Operation Clean Slate. She was already running for her car. How many assets? At least 6. Maybe more. They are pulling in contractors from Philadelphia and Boston. This isn't just a hit, Agent Cho. This is a siege. Cho gunned the engine, weaving through Manhattan traffic with her siren wailing. She called Morrison. Get Jiho back to the hospital. Now. Are you insane? He's our witness. He's also the only person who knows his father's tactics well enough to predict them. We need him. She swerved around a taxi. And if we don't move fast, Ayomide Okafor is dead by sunrise. At the federal holding facility, Jiho sat in his cell, staring at the concrete ceiling. He'd signed the preliminary cooperation agreement an hour ago. Everything he knew about the Kangdae syndicate, the shipping routes, the political bribes, the names of every corrupt official from Seoul to New York, it was all going on record. But something felt wrong. His father was many things, but he wasn't careless. Chairman Kang would have known about the DNA match before the federal agents did. He had people everywhere, including inside law enforcement. Which meant he'd already be moving. Jiho was on his feet, pacing, when Morrison appeared at the cell door. Get up, the detective said. We're going back to Mount Sinai. What happened? Your father's sending a team to kill Ayomide. Morrison unlocked the cell. And you're going to help us stop him. They cuffed him again, protocol, but looser this time. In the SUV racing toward the hospital, Agent Cho handed him a tablet showing the hospital's floor plan. The ICU is here. She pointed. 4th floor, West Wing. 32 beds, but only 8 currently occupied. Ayomide is in Bay 7. We've got 4 agents on site, but if your father's sending professionals, that won't be enough. Jiho studied the layout, his mind shifting into the tactical mode his father had drilled into him since childhood. He'll come through the service elevator. It's the least monitored. 2-man teams. 1 to breach, 1 to provide cover. They'll use suppressed weapons to avoid panic, but they won't hesitate to kill staff if anyone gets in the way. Jesus, Morrison muttered. You wanted my help. Jiho looked up, his eyes hard. This is what help looks like. My father doesn't make mistakes. If he wants someone dead, they die. The only advantage we have is that I know how he thinks. And that is scorched earth. No witnesses. No evidence. Jiho handed back the tablet. He won't just kill Ayomide. He'll kill everyone on that floor. The SUV screamed to a stop outside Mount Sinai's emergency entrance. Cho's phone rang, the hospital security office. Agent Cho, we've got a situation. 6 men just entered through the loading dock. They are dressed as orderlies, but one of our cameras caught weapons under their scrubs. Lock down the ICU. Now. Too late. They're already in the stairwell. Jiho didn't wait for permission. He bolted from the SUV, still handcuffed, Morrison and Cho sprinting behind him. They hit the stairwell at a dead run, taking stairs 3 at a time. Above them, gunfire. Suppressed, but unmistakable. Screams followed. 4th floor. Cho shouted into her radio. All units converge. They burst into the ICU corridor to chaos. The assassins had already breached, 6 men in dark clothes, moving with military precision. 1 stood guard at the main entrance. 2 were methodically checking rooms. 3 were advancing on Bay 7, where Ayomide lay unconscious. The guard turned, raising his weapon. Jiho moved on instinct. He dropped low, his cuffed hands swinging up in a hammer strike that caught the guard's wrist. The gun clattered to the floor. Jiho pivoted, driving his elbow into the man's throat, crushing his windpipe. The guard fell, gasping. Morrison grabbed the fallen weapon, providing cover fire as more agents flooded in. But the assassins weren't retreating, they were advancing on Ayomide's room with surgical focus. Jiho ran. His hands were still cuffed. He had no weapon. But he had something the assassins didn't, everything to lose. He hit the first man with his full weight, driving him into the wall. The assassin's head cracked against concrete. Jiho grabbed his weapon, a Glock with suppressor, and spun toward the next threat. 2 more assassins were entering Ayomide's room. No. Jiho's roar echoed through the corridor. He fired 3 shots, center mass, the training his father had forced on him now saving the woman his father wanted dead. Both men went down. Jiho staggered into the room. Ayomide was still unconscious, her machines still beeping, oblivious to the war being fought for her life. He positioned himself between her bed and the door, weapon raised, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Outside, the firefight continued. Federal agents against trained killers. The hospital's fire alarm screamed. Patients were being evacuated, medical staff herded to safety. Jiho didn't move. Wouldn't move. Not until every threat was eliminated. It took 17 minutes to secure the floor. 3 assassins dead. 3 in custody. 0 civilian casualties, though 2 agents were wounded. When Agent Cho finally entered Ayomide's room, she found Jiho on his knees beside her bed, still cuffed, the gun on the floor beside him. He was whispering to her in Korean, prayers or confessions or both. "It's over," Cho said gently. Jiho looked up, his eyes wet. "No. It's just beginning. My father won't stop. He'll send more. He'll burn the whole city down before he lets me testify. Then we'll be ready." Morrison appeared in the doorway, holding up a phone. "And we've got good news. The survivors we caught? One of them is already talking. Gave us locations for 3 safe houses and the name of your father's accountant. It won't be enough." Jiho turned back to Ayomide, gently taking her hand. Nothing's ever enough with him. But he was wrong. Because in that moment, Ayomide's fingers twitched. Her eyelids fluttered. And for the first time in 18 hours, she took a breath on her own. "She's waking up," Cho said, already calling for the medical team. Jiho leaned closer, his forehead touching hers. "Come back to me," he whispered. "Please, come back." And in the darkness of her unconscious mind, Ayomide heard him. Felt herself being pulled toward his voice, toward the light, toward a truth she wasn't ready for but could no longer avoid. Her eyes opened. The first thing Ayomide saw was Jiho's face. The second thing she saw was the handcuffs. "What?" Her voice was sandpaper rough, her throat raw from the breathing tube. "What happened?" "You were poisoned." Jiho's voice cracked. He looked destroyed, his royal blue suit stained with blood, his hair wild, his eyes red from crying. "At the gala. Someone put something in your drink." Memory came back in fragments. The ballroom. The dizziness. The floor rushing up to meet her. "Who?" Jiho's face contorted with pain. "My father." The machines monitoring her vitals began beeping faster. A nurse rushed in, checking her fall, but Ayomide waved her away. "Your father? Why would your father?" "There's something you need to know." Morrison stepped forward, his expression grave. He pulled out a chair, sat down beside her bed. "About your family. About where you come from." Over the next 20 minutes, Morrison laid it out. The massacre in Nigeria. Her grandmother's survival. The asylum. The hidden identity. And finally, the connection to the Kangdae syndicate. Ayomide listened in silence, her face unreadable. When Morrison finished, she turned to Jiho. "Did you know?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "No." He met her eyes, and she saw the truth there, raw and terrible. I swear to God, I had no idea. If I'd known. You would have what? Her voice turned sharp. Stayed away from me? Protected me? She laughed, bitter and hollow. Your father killed my family, Ji-ho. He tried to kill me. And you? She looked at the handcuffs, at the blood on his suit. You're still his son. I'm testifying against him. Everything I know, I'm giving to the FBI. That doesn't change who you are. Tears were streaming down her face now. It doesn't change that your blood is his blood. That your money, your suits, everything you have, it's all built on the bones of people like my grandmother. I know. Ji-ho's voice broke. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't bring them back. Ayomide turned her face away. Sorry doesn't fix this. Agent Cho stepped forward. Dr. Okafor, I know this is overwhelming, but we need to discuss your safety. Your father's made one attempt on your life. He'll make another. Then put me in witness protection. Ayomide's voice was flat, emotionless. Give me a new name. A new life. Whatever it takes. What about him? Morrison gestured to Ji-ho. He saved your life tonight. Fought off 6 assassins to keep you safe. I don't care. Ayomide finally looked at Ji-ho again, and the coldness in her eyes was worse than any anger. Get him out of here. I never want to see him again. Ji-ho flinched like she'd struck him. Ayomide, please. Out. Now. Morrison and Cho exchanged glances. Then Morrison gently took Ji-ho's arm. Come on, son. Give her time. They led him toward the door. Ji-ho looked back one last time, memorizing her face. The woman he loved, the woman his father had tried to murder, the woman who now looked at him like he was the monster. I love you, he said quietly. That's the only truth that matters. Ayomide didn't respond. Just turned her head away, staring at the wall until she heard the door close. Then she wept. For 3 days, Ayomide recovered in the ICU under federal protection. Ji-ho was moved to a secure facility, where he spent 18 hours a day in debriefings, mapping out every detail of his father's empire. He didn't ask about Ayomide. The agents didn't volunteer information. But on the 4th day, something changed. Ayomide was being transferred to a safe house when the convoy was attacked. 2 SUVs, 3 armed men in each. Professional. Coordinated. Exactly the kind of operation Ji-ho had warned about. The federal agents fought back, but they were outgunned. 1 agent was killed immediately. Another wounded. The attackers were seconds from breaching Ayomide's vehicle when Ji-ho appeared. He'd broken out of federal custody 2 hours earlier. Overpowered a guard, stolen a car, tracked the convoy using methods he'd learned from his father's security team. He'd promised Morrison he'd never run. But he'd also promised himself that Ayomide would live. He hit the attackers from behind, weapon drawn, moving like the predator his father had trained him to be. 3 shots, 3 dead. The remaining assassins scattered. When the smoke cleared, Ji-ho stood in the middle of the street, breathing hard, surrounded by bodies. Federal backup was 30 seconds out. He could run. Disappear. Use his father's networks to vanish forever. Instead, he dropped his weapon and raised his hands. Agent Cho arrived to find him on his knees, cuffed by the surviving agents. She walked over, her expression unreadable. You just violated your cooperation agreement, she said. Assaulting a federal officer. Escaping custody. I could lock you up for life. I know. Ji-ho didn't look up. Is she safe? She's safe. Then do what you have to do. Cho studied him for a long moment. Then she turned to the agents. Uncuff him. He just saved a witness's life. And he came back. She looked at Ji-ho. Didn't you? You could have run, but you came back. I gave you my word. Ji-ho stood slowly. I'm seeing this through. Whatever it takes. In the armored SUV, Ayomide watched through the bulletproof glass. Watched Ji-ho stand in the street, covered in blood, choosing justice over freedom. Choosing her over everything. Something in her chest twisted. Take me to him, she said quietly. The agent driving looked uncertain. Dr. Okafor, I don't think. Now. They helped her out of the vehicle. She was still weak, still recovering, but she walked toward Jiho on her own, refusing assistance. He turned when he heard her footsteps. Their eyes met. "You broke out of federal custody," she said. "Yes." "Why?" "Because they were coming for you. Because I swore I'd keep you safe, even if you hate me, even if you never want to see me again." His voice was steady now, no longer desperate, just honest. "I can't change who my father is. I can't undo what he did to your family. But I can make sure he never hurts anyone again. Starting with you." Ayomide searched his face, the sharp wolf-like features, the black rose tattoo, the eyes that had seen too much and yet still looked at her with something like hope. "Your testimony," she said. "Will it be enough to convict him?" "Yes. But it'll take months. Maybe years. Trials, appeals, all of it." "And you're willing to do that? To destroy your own father?" "He destroyed himself." Jiho's jaw tightened. "I'm just making sure everyone knows it." Ayomide took a breath. "Made her decision. Then I'm testifying too. About the poison. About everything. We take him down together." Jiho's eyes widened. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." Her voice was steel. "He killed my family. He tried to kill me. And he poisoned me with the same chemical he used to murder 300 people. He doesn't get to walk away from that. Neither of us does. It's dangerous. He'll keep coming. Let him come." Ayomide stepped closer, close enough to see the exhaustion carved into Jiho's face, the weight of his choices. "You said you love me. Prove it. Not with pretty words or grand gestures. Prove it by finishing this. By putting him away forever." "I will." Jiho's voice was a vow. "I promise." She nodded. Started to turn away. Then stopped. "Jiho." "Yes. Thank you. For saving my life. Always." He smiled, sad and broken, but real. "For as long as I'm breathing." She walked back to the SUV without looking back. But as they drove away, she watched him in the side mirror, standing in the street surrounded by federal agents, his royal blue suit torn and bloody, his hands cuffed once more. He was still a wolf. Still dangerous. Still his father's son. But maybe, just maybe, he could be something else too. The trial of Chairman Kang lasted 6 months. Every day, Jiho sat in the witness box and dismantled his father's empire piece by piece. Bank accounts in the Caimans. Weapons shipments to 3 continents. Politicians who'd taken bribes. Judges who'd looked the other way. And Nigeria. When they reached the massacre, the courtroom went silent. The prosecution showed the photographs. Played recorded confessions from the surviving assassins Jiho had helped capture. And then Ayomide took the stand. She wore green, her grandmother's color, and spoke clearly, without tears. She described the poison. The collapse. Waking up to learn that her entire family history was a lie. Finding out that the man she'd loved was connected to the monster who'd destroyed her grandmother's world. "But he's not his father," she said, looking directly at Jiho. "He proved that by choosing the truth over his family. By choosing justice over loyalty. That doesn't erase the past. But it matters." The defense tried to discredit her. Tried to paint her as a scorned lover seeking revenge. But Ayomide was a doctor, trained in precision and facts, and she didn't waver. Neither did Jiho. On the final day of testimony, the prosecution asked him, "Do you believe your father ordered the attempt on Dr. Okafor's life?" "I know he did." "How can you be certain?" Jiho looked at his father for the first time since the trial began. Chairman Kang sat perfectly still, his face a mask of contempt. "Because I'm his son," Jiho said quietly. "And I know exactly how he thinks. Loose ends. Witnesses. Anything that threatens his power, he eliminates it. He tried to eliminate Ayomide. He would have eliminated me, too, eventually. We were both just collateral damage to him." No further questions. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous on all counts, guilty. Chairman Kang was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. Additional charges were pending in Nigeria, South Korea, and 3 other countries. It was over. The sentencing for Jiho came 2 weeks later. Despite his cooperation, Despite the lives he'd saved, he'd still been part of the Kangdae syndicate for years. The prosecutors recommended a reduced sentence, 10 years instead of life, but it was still prison. Still punishment for the man he'd been. The morning of sentencing, Agent Cho visited him in the holding cell. "Your father's asking to see you," she said. Ji-ho didn't hesitate. "No. He says he has information about other syndicate operations. Might be leveraging for a deal." "He's lying. He'd burn the whole world before he cooperated." Ji-ho looked up. "Is Ayomide here?" "In the courtroom. She wanted to be present for the sentencing." His heart twisted. "Did she say why?" "No. But she brought something." Cho pulled out a small envelope. "Asked me to give this to you." Inside, a photograph. Ji-ho and Ayomide, taken at the gala mere minutes before her collapse. They were dancing, his arms around her waist, her head on his shoulder. Both smiling, unaware of the storm about to break. On the back, in Ayomide's handwriting, "You chose the truth. That means something." Ji-ho closed his eyes, clutching the photo like a lifeline. In the courtroom, the judge reviewed the case with clinical detachment. Ji-ho stood before the bench in an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed, the black rose tattoo visible above his collar. "Mr. Kang, you've pled guilty to multiple counts of racketeering and conspiracy. Normally, such crimes carry a mandatory minimum of 20 years. However, given your extensive cooperation with federal authorities, which directly led to the conviction of Chairman Kang and the dismantling of one of the largest criminal organizations in North America, this court is prepared to show leniency." Ji-ho didn't dare hope. "You are hereby sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. With good behavior, you'll be eligible for parole in 7. The judge paused. "I want to be clear, Mr. Kang. You're not walking free because you're a good person. You're walking free eventually because you chose to be better. Don't waste that choice." "I won't, Your Honor." They let him out through the side door. But as he passed the gallery, he saw her. Ayomide, seated in the 3rd row, wearing the same green dress from her testimony. Their eyes met. She didn't smile. Didn't wave. But she nodded, just once. An acknowledgement. A promise of something, though Ji-ho didn't know what. 7 years. He could survive 7 years. And maybe, when he got out, she'd still be there. Maybe not as his lover. Maybe not even as his friend. But as the woman who'd shown him that redemption was possible, even for wolves. Epilogue. 6 years and 11 months later. Ji-ho was released on a Tuesday morning. No fanfare. No press. Just a bus ticket to New York and the clothes on his back. He'd refused offers from his remaining family members. The syndicate had fractured after his father's conviction, but pieces remained. Ji-ho wanted no part of them. He found an apartment in Queens. Got a job at a non-profit that helped ex-convicts reintegrate into society. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't pay well. But it was honest, and that mattered. He didn't contact Ayomide. Didn't think he had the right. But 3 months after his release, he was leaving work when he saw her. She stood across the street, leaning against a car, wearing scrubs. She'd gone back to Mount Sinai after the trial, thrown herself into saving premature babies, into giving children the futures her grandmother's generation had been denied. Their eyes met. Ji-ho's heart stopped. Ayomide crossed the street slowly. When she stood before him, she looked different. Older. Stronger. But the same deep brown eyes that had once looked at him with love. "Hi," she said simply. "Hi." His voice was hoarse. "How did you find me?" "Agent Cho keeps tabs on you. Makes sure you're staying clean." A small smile. "She likes you, for some reason." "And you?" The question hung between them like a fragile thing. "Do you like me?" Ayomide considered this. "I don't know yet. You destroyed my world. You also saved my life. Those things don't cancel each other out." "I know. But I've been thinking about what my grandmother used to say. That forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing not to let the past poison your future." She took a breath. "I'm tired of being poisoned, Ji-ho. So am I. So maybe." She held out her hand. "We start over. Not where we were. We can't go back there. But somewhere new." Ji-ho stared at her hand. At the possibility of redemption wearing green scrubs and offering him a second chance he didn't deserve but desperately wanted. He took her hand. "Somewhere new," he agreed. They walked together through Queens, past bodegas and playgrounds, talking about everything and nothing. About her work at the hospital. About his job helping ex-cons. About the empty spaces their families had left behind and how they might fill them with something better. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was messy and complicated and uncertain. But it was real. And for a wolf learning to be human again, that was enough. In a prison cell upstate, Chairman Kang heard about his son's release. He smiled, a cold, reptilian thing, and began planning. Because monsters don't die in cages. They wait. They adapt. And they always come back. But that's a story for another day. For now, Jiho and Ayomide walked hand in hand through the city that had broken them both, learning to be whole again. Together. If you made it this far, you've just witnessed a love story born in blood and redeemed by truth. Jiho chose justice over his own father, and Ayomide chose forgiveness over hatred. But as you saw, Chairman Kang is still out there, still plotting, still dangerous. Will he strike again? Can Jiho and Ayomide truly build a future together? Or will the sins of the past come back to destroy them? If you want to find out what happens next, smash that like button right now. It helps this story reach more people who need to hear it. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter. Because trust me, this saga is far from over. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you think Ayomide should give Jiho a second chance, or is some betrayal too deep to forgive? And let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel across the world. Remember, every like, every subscribe, every comment fuels the next story. You're not just a viewer, you're part of this journey. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay blessed, stay curious, and never stop believing that even wolves can learn to love. Peace.